Lady May, the 150-foot mega vessel in the Long Island Sound where Steve Bannon was arrested today. The former Trump advisor and staunch anti-globalist taken into custody on the Chinese billionaire's yacht where he's been living, pleading not guilty to charges he defrauded donors in a border wall campaign. Joe Biden's big night. After multiple White House runs spanning decades, the former vice president set to accept the Democratic Party's nomination for president. How much will he laser in on President Trump, and how much will he be selling himself? The critical speech before Republicans have their say. California's wildfire emergency turns deadly. A chopper goes down in the flames. Thousands trying to evacuate, and we'll take you behind the scenes how the firefight's affected by the pandemic and the even bigger concern.
It seems that every year many of us have been doing this a long time and talked about seeing fire spread like we've never seen before.
COVID crisis. More than 5.5 million cases in the U.S. Schools struggling to stick to back-to-school plans. Major colleges and universities condemning, even suspending some students for partying. A critic of Russian leader Vladimir Putin now in a coma, possibly poisoned, becoming ill during a flight, forcing an emergency landing. Confronting history, the African-American mayor of the former capital of the Confederacy and his bold and potentially life-threatening move to take down monuments in his city.
When I removed those monuments, the thought of politics never crossed my mind.
And the two tropical systems off the coast posing a potential double threat of storms. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We'll get to the arrest of President Trump's former campaign manager shortly, but we begin tonight with the final night of the Democratic National Convention. Biden's former boss, President Barack Obama, made an impassioned plea to vote Trump out, saying our democracy is at stake. Biden's running mate in her historic speech said she knows a predator when she sees one. But tonight, Joe Biden will have to make the case for himself, trying to convince voters why he should replace President Trump and go to the White House. It's the biggest speech of his career, and the president is already fighting back. Our Mary Bruce leads us off.
Tonight, Joe Biden just hours away from giving the most important political speech of his life. Our camera's spotting him checking out the stage. Biden has been trying to give this speech for more than 30 years through 3 runs at the White House. It will be a surreal scene. Speaking before a virtually empty room, Biden is expected to highlight his own personal story of loss and resilience. His campaign highlighting his work on behalf of American families.
It matters that you have in your mind the family that you're trying to reach, the neighborhood that you're trying to reach, the people whose lives are affected by what you do.
Democrats have spent the last 3 days arguing the president is threatening American democracy and undermining this election.
They're hoping to make it as hard as possible for you to vote and to convince you that your vote does not matter. Do not let them take away your power. Do not let them take away your democracy.
Hillary Clinton presenting herself as a cautionary tale, warning Democrats not to take anything for granted.
Joe and Kamala can win by 3 million votes and still lose. Take it from me. So we need numbers overwhelming so Trump can't sneak or steal his way to victory.
Biden's running mate says she's ready for the fight.
I fought against transnational criminal organizations. I took on the biggest banks and helped take down one of the biggest for-profit colleges. I know a predator when I see one.
President Trump today counter-programming in Pennsylvania, stopping for pizza.
We supposedly have the best pizza.
He didn't wear a mask, though Pennsylvania health authorities say they should be worn in restaurants. Earlier, he ripped into his rival at a rally just outside of Biden's hometown of Scranton.
I think you people know it better than I do. He left. He abandoned Pennsylvania. He abandoned Scranton. He was here for a short period of time.
Mary Bruce joins us now from Wilmington, Delaware. Big night for Joe Biden. How has he been preparing for today? And what's the campaign saying that he needs to accomplish tonight?
Well, the
campaign is quick to point out that they say Joe Biden has really been preparing for this speech, for this moment throughout his entire career. And this will be, in many ways, his best chance to make his case before the nation. Because of the pandemic, Joe Biden has been forced to campaign largely behind closed doors. Now here, in just a few hours, he will step before the cameras and outline his vision for the future. One of the challenges here is that Joe Biden has to make this moment not just about why he opposes President Trump, but also what he plans to do differently going forward. You are going to hear a lot about Joe Biden, the man, the family man, the challenges he has overcome in his life, all of the loss and resilience in his past. And it's also a chance for him to showcase that empathetic side that he is known so well for. A chance for him to try and connect with Americans, not just with Democrats, but with all Americans. Lindsay. Apparently, former governor of Virginia asked him, how long have you been preparing for tonight's appearance? And he said, for my entire life. And apparently tonight is really going to be a family affair, right, Mary? This is. You are going to be hearing throughout the night snippets of pre-recorded video from his beloved grandchildren who he talks about so much. And there's going to be a big focus on how Joe Biden came to this decision, the moment that the family had that family meeting where he decided he would, in fact, run in this campaign. And, of course, introducing him before this big speech, we've learned will be a video of his 3 children. You're going to be hearing from Hunter Biden, from his daughter Ashley Biden, and the words of his late son, Beau, who's one of his last wishes before he passed away was encouraging his father to launch this campaign. It will be a moment where things come full circle. Lindsay. Mary Bruce, thanks so much. We'll check back in with you later tonight. And we're joined now by New Mexico Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, who spoke at the convention last night, focused on responding to the threat of climate change. Take a listen.
We know time is running out to save our planet. We have the chance this November to end 2 existential crises, the Trump presidency and the environmental annihilation he represents.
Governor, we thank you so much for joining us. Now, you focus your remarks on the need for investments in tackling the climate crisis, also to create jobs. But the head of Biden's transition team, former Senator Ted Kaufman, told the Wall Street Journal this week, and I'd like to quote, I do not think it would be a big increase in federal spending because I think basically when we get in, the pantry is going to be bare. We're going to have limited funds to do what we're going to do. Do you agree with that? And if he wins, any concerns that the Biden administration won't be able to make massive investments in things like clean energy and green jobs, especially if Republicans still have control of the Senate?
Well, yeah, let's do the last part first, Lindsay, and thank you for having me on. If we have Republicans still in control of the Senate, I do think that presents a challenge. And we know that this administration has caused this economic crisis by not tackling COVID in a uniform, science-based way, and that the debt, the federal debt and the national deficit, or the national debt and the federal deficit, I apologize, are extremely critical issues to confront. However, infrastructure is the kind of investment that has immediate returns to the federal government and to state governments. We're all going to be hungry for a partnership. And if we want to build a credible, successful economic future for this country, that future is in renewable energy. So I think there's got to be an appetite. And even in the Trump presidency, there's been a congressional appetite for infrastructure spending. We just can't get a deal because I don't think the president's really interested in investing in America. He's only interested if that investment somehow benefits him directly.
Of course, tonight we're going to hear from Vice President Biden. There's been some criticism that the convention hasn't discussed enough specifics on the agenda of what a Biden administration would do, what it would look like. Does Joe Biden need to do more now to detail exactly how he'd tackle issues like the economy tonight? And what are you specifically looking to hear from him?
Well, I actually like feeling that one-to-one, you're talking directly to me. I think that the majority of the keynote type speakers have really done that. I feel like they're sitting with me at either my kitchen table or in my living room. He is very effective at that. And, you know, we're all grieving. Americans are grieving that we have lost family members, or we've got very sick family members related to COVID. Parents are grieving that they don't have what they can count on, a public education system that can deal with education during a pandemic. I think we all want to know family businesses have been lost. They want to know that that compassion, that empathy, I've had to grieve. And I've built myself back, right, with the love, caring, compassion of a family. You need a federal government that cares about you, and a federal government that cares about you can actually deliver for you. And then I hope here's an opportunity for him to talk about a multitude of things he wants to do, including, I'll go right back to climate change and then to somewhere else. Look, we are leading New Mexico. I'm very proud of that. We know that our rural communities, and we're a minority majority state, every community, right, has Hispanics and other communities of color who are disenfranchised and disadvantaged by environmental issues and lack of investment in a new economy. He needs to talk about that again. He needs to talk about investing in education. He needs to talk about the American dream should have already been available for every community of color. And he needs to talk about how these economic investments really get to working families and protect them, including healthcare access and reduction of healthcare costs. And when he does that, he can give surrogates like me an opportunity and platform to do more in these communities. Look, it's all different in a COVID world. No campaign has really thought about how they can connect to individual voters. This is his chance to open their eyes, open the door, and then I and other surrogates, we need to get to these relationships in our states and surrounding states to make sure that we deliver for Joe Biden and Senator Kamala Harris. And that's exactly what I intend to do.
We heard that powerful testimony last night from an 11-year-old in Florida whose mother was deported. But beyond that, there's been rather little focus on immigration issues in this convention and a criticism also of an overall lack of Latino representation. Would you agree with that criticism? And what does the Biden campaign need to do differently in order to reach out to Latino voters?
Well, I agree that the shortened DNC convention and my good friend, Secretary Julian Castro, has been pretty critical about we should have thought about getting all of it in a condensed time. That's an easy criticism. I'm not picking on Julian. He's amazing. But it's an easy criticism to launch at the DNC. And again, in a COVID world, you don't have all of these opportunities. I have not seen any campaign do enough in any context to really reach Latino and Hispanic voters. And immigration is a tough issue to take on. And I do want and expect that this administration is going to be very clear, the Biden-Harris administration, and in this speech tonight and beyond, that we are talking about DACA and DAPA, protecting our families who know really no other country other than this one at their own. They serve this country. They're veterans. They're entrepreneurs and small business owners. We also know that immigration reform brings in at least $1 trillion, right, into the federal and state economies. It makes no sense, and family separation is not gone. And the trauma that this country has inflicted on those families, we don't allow anyone to legally immigrate here, and we aren't taking care of the crises that are happening in our Central and South American countries. We must do a better job, and again, between now and November, let's see how much we get tonight, and let's make sure that all of us that care about having a brand new opportunity in the White House, that we're talking about these issues. This is not a country that's cruel. And to see a White House that's used cruelty as their effort in all policies, we should all be done with that. And I firmly believe Hispanic families, Latino families, minority families and communities all across this country, they want fairness, equity, empathy, and a real opportunity to achieve the American dream. That includes immigration reform.
Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, we thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you coming on the show tonight.
Thank you very much, Lindsay.
Turning now to the indictment of Steve Bannon, one of President Trump's former top advisors. Federal prosecutors accused Bannon and 3 others of raising more than $25 million as part to construct part of the southern border wall and then using some of that money for personal expenses. The former Trump campaign chair and White House strategist was arrested today on a $35 million yacht off the coast of Connecticut. So where does the case stand and what's the president saying about all this? Our chief White House correspondent, Jonathan Karl, has the very latest.
Today, the man who ran President Trump's presidential campaign and served as his chief strategist in the White House was arrested off the coast of Connecticut on this $28 million yacht owned by an exiled Chinese billionaire and charged with money laundering and fraud. Steve Bannon and 3 others are accused of defrauding hundreds of thousands of people by personally profiting off a scheme to raise money to help build President Trump's border wall.
Build that wall! Build that wall!
With a group called We Build the Wall, Bannon and the others raised $25 million, promising to build a section of the wall themselves.
They see that this is a way that they can take action to actually, make happen a physical barrier on the southern border and support President Trump and what President Trump's trying to do.
The group promised donors a brick in the wall with their names on it.
You're not going to last forever, but your brick will.
The project was started by Brian Kolfage, an Air Force vet who lost 3 limbs in Iraq. In fundraising pitches, he insisted every penny raised would go to the wall.
100% of your money goes towards the wall. It's not going to line someone's pocket. I'm taking $0 of the salary, no compensation.
But the indictment alleges Kolfage spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on home renovations, payments toward a boat, a luxury SUV, a golf cart, jewelry, cosmetic surgery, personal tax payments, and credit card debt. And that Bannon himself used hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations for his own personal expenses. President Trump today downplayed his connections to Bannon, who he fired 3 years ago.
I feel very badly. I haven't been dealing with him for a long period of time.
The president said he never liked the Build the Wall campaign.
I didn't like, when I read about it, I didn't like it. I said, this is for government, this isn't for private people. And it sounded to me like showboating.
But the president's son, Donald Trump Jr., promoted the project at an event last year, saying it's exactly the kind of thing the private sector should be doing.
This is private enterprise at its finest, doing it better, faster, cheaper than anything else. And what you guys are doing is pretty amazing.
In a statement today, Donald Trump Jr. said that other than the speech, he never supported the project and said if the allegations are true, quote, the group deserves to be held accountable.
And John Karl joins us now. So where is Bannon at this moment and what's next in the case?
Bannon has been released on $5 million bail, but his travel is restricted to the New York and Washington areas. And, Lindsay, he is not allowed to fly on private jets or travel on private yachts. His case will go forward. As you saw, he has pleaded not guilty. Presumably, he will fight these charges.
And we heard President Trump downplay his ties to Bannon, but he's now the latest in a long list of people connected to the president to face charges.
It's really quite a list. People very close to the president includes, of course, his personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, his former campaign chairman, Manafort. It also includes his original political advisor, Roger Stone, his national security advisor, Michael Flynn. You could also say it includes the very first member of Congress who endorsed him, Congressman Collins. So it's a long list of people who served in very, very important positions for President Trump or who supported him very early on, who now face or have faced criminal charges.
Jonathan Karl, thanks so much. The tax returns as part of its investigation into hush money payments to Stormy Daniels. And the Supreme Court did rule the state investigation can go forward. Today, the president predicted these efforts would end up back in the Supreme Court and called it all a witch hunt. Turning now to the fast-moving wildfires in California tonight, Governor Newsom has had to cancel a planned appearance at the DNC as the fires rage across his state. The inferno is destroying many homes and threatening tens of thousands more. The flames taking the lives of 2 firefighters on the front lines. And tonight, their fellow firefighters continuing the fight to save lives and livelihoods. Our Clayton Sandell is in Napa County.
Tonight, homes fully engulfed in flames, more families forced to flee as the lightning-stoked fires across California take more lives. Power company PG&E reporting today that one of their workers helping fire crews fight the blazes was found unconscious in his vehicle and later died. The death comes after chopper pilot Michael Fournier died fighting a different fire. His helicopter crashed in Fresno County yesterday. The LNU Lightning Complex fire has scorched over 130,000 acres in just 2 days, an area 4 times the size of San Francisco, and forced more than 20,000 from their homes. Some, like Scott Kirshner, staying to fight.
Just trying to save the house. My father-in-law's house is down there. I'm headed there next.
We met Lynn Borrow at a roadblock. She evacuated in a hurry and forgot her insulin.
I had to decide what to pack on very short notice.
After a 2-hour wait, they finally let her back home, but just for a few minutes.
I'm very thankful they let us come in.
St. Helena Hospital in Napa County forced to evacuate patients, and Travis Air Force Base ordered all non-essential personnel to get out as well. Further south, new evacuations near Santa Cruz, and the CZU Lightning Complex fire explodes there, burning homes. Tonight, visitors and tourists in hotels are being asked to leave the county to make room for fire evacuees.
Our thanks to Clayton for that. We'll have much more in our next half hour on how the heat and the virus are making this season's firefight especially difficult. And now, as we near the peak hurricane season, all eyes are on the tropics and on a dual tropical threat. 2 storm systems making their way through the Caribbean before potentially impacting different parts of the U.S. coast. Rob Marciano now has the latest on these storms and the fire threat.
Hey, Lindsay, lots to talk about. The tropics getting very active, and the heat just won't let up, and the fires not getting much better because of it in the west. Excessive heat warnings now have been extended for another day in Southern California. Take a look at this map. Los Angeles and Ventura counties included, but back towards Vegas, Phoenix, you're back into the hot zone. Not as much lightning as in the past couple of days, so that's the only good news here, but another day of just potentially record-breaking heat. All right, the tropics, we've got 3 potential tropical storms. The first 2 are the ones we're most worried about, TD14 and TD13. Let's go over number 13. That's likely to be the next one, and could be the stronger one of the 2. Not a whole lot of certainty with its forecast, but it brings it at tropical storm strength here over the weekend. Somewhere north of the Dominican Republic, maybe the Turks and Caicos, Bahamas, somewhere around South Florida on Monday, maybe in the Gulf of Mexico Tuesday. Could go north into the Carolinas on Tuesday. Very low confidence on this. We should have a better handle on it tomorrow. TD14 in the western Caribbean expected to hit the Yucatan in some way, shape, or form here in the next 2 days, and then reemerge in the Gulf of Mexico, which is always dangerous, as you know, potentially as a strong tropical storm or maybe a hurricane into Texas or Louisiana sometime during the day on Tuesday. So you notice the timing of these 2 things. We could potentially have 2 tropical storms and or hurricanes hitting the U.S. at roughly the same time. That would be a historic event, and that's something we're not looking for. We're hoping for something less historic, that's for sure. Lindsay, we will keep you posted and be watching this hour by hour over the next 5 days. Lindsay?
So certainly don't want to make history with that 1-2 punch. Okay, thanks, Rob. And now to our battered job market and economy, a focus of attack by Democrats making their case this week to American voters. After some recent declines in jobless claims, today we learned that another 1.1 million Americans applied for new unemployment relief in just 1 week. This was worse than economists had predicted and makes it the 22nd straight week of historically high unemployment claims. And now to some somewhat encouraging news on the COVID front. New cases are down from a week ago, just in time as more students are heading back to school. Images like these, though, at Syracuse University show students at a large party, and they are drawing anger. As school says they could force all students to leave campus and study from home. But the bigger concern now, a new study shows that school children could be silent spreaders of the disease and have higher levels of the virus in their airways than sick adults. A troubling development as the death toll toll continues to rise. It's now at more than 174,000 lives lost. Steve Osunsami has the latest.
At Notre Dame in Indiana, where the football team means everything to this school, today they announced that 5 of their players tested positive for COVID-19, along with 75 other students. They now have more than 300 confirmed cases, and students are now having to live with new restrictions.
In classes, you sit 6 feet away in specially marked chairs. You're asked to wear a mask.
Health officials say this is part of the problem. Parties like this one under investigation at Syracuse University. This junior at the University of Michigan, where more than a dozen students have tested positive, wants her classmates to do better.
Your choices will have repercussions.
At Purdue today, school administrators say they're not kidding and suspended 36 students who were partying just last night. At the University of Kansas, they've just connected 89 new cases to Greek houses on campus.
I've been feeling pretty anxious, honestly. I have really bad asthma.
There's a study out tonight that says many of the nation's school children could be, quote, silent spreaders of the disease, and that many children with COVID-19 who have no symptoms can have higher levels of the virus in their airways than sick adults who are hospitalized in ICUs. There are also new guidelines that schools should only reopen classrooms in areas where positive test results are less than 5%. Parents now have this tool online to check on their schools.
Only a couple dozen of the 750 counties that we track each week would meet those criteria today.
In the nation's second largest school system in Los Angeles, remote learning started this morning. But there's a nationwide shortage of the laptops and devices that schools need.
I'm still working from home as well, so it was kind of hard for me to try to work and then try to get the iPad working as well. So we had to run back up to his school and they tried to fix it. Unfortunately, it didn't work, so here we are.
Lots of frustrated parents for sure. For more now, let's bring in Steve Osunsami. And Steve, tonight we heard from a government advisor on timing for a possible vaccine.
Well, we all know a vaccine, of course, could help solve a lot of these problems. And the chief advisor to Operation Warp Speed, which is the government's program to speed this vaccine along, has come out now saying that based on what they're seeing, it's entirely possible we won't see a vaccine widely available to most Americans until as late as next June. That's not what people, of course, want to hear, Lindsay.
Not at all. And with so many schools now going virtual, there's concern over a growing achievement gap. People have been talking about that, worried about that for a while now.
There is an achievement gap, and I'll tell you, speaking personally, I have a very good friend in town here who is a principal at a grade school who was telling me that they normally see a slide in learning in the summer during a regular school year. He said it's about a 15 to 20% slide in learning. That slide is expected to continue with students working at home remotely. While you're keeping students safe, it doesn't replace in-person instruction. We all know that if you can do it safely, it's best for children to be in school. There's also another issue. School districts across the country who are trying to teach students remotely are dealing with a shortage of laptops and other equipment that they need. And this shortage or desert, technology desert, is greater in poor and black and brown communities and families who don't have access to iPads and laptops where they can connect and learn remotely on their own.
Yeah, just
Lindsay.
adding insult to injury. All right, Steve Osunsami, thanks so much. And when we come back, America's leading infectious disease expert Anthony Fauci is undergoing surgery. We'll explain why. The baseball announcer caught on a hot mic making an anti-gay slur, and what happened next. And Vladimir Putin's biggest political threat possibly poisoned the plane he was on forced to land. Now he's in a coma. Stay with us. Tonight, 2 men have been arrested, and the search is on for a third after that disturbing incident caught on camera of 3 transgender women attacked in Hollywood while witnesses did absolutely nothing. In the initial 26-minute video that created a social media firestorm, they were harassed, attacked, and one of them was robbed. According to the most recent FBI data released, hate crimes directed at transgender individuals increased 42% in 1 year. The victims say that if they were not transgender, bystanders would have have stepped in to help. Turning now overseas, as the leading opposition figure in Russia, Alexei Navalny is one of Vladimir Putin's fiercest critics and has been a threat to his tight hold on power. But tonight, after what seemed like a routine trip to Siberia, he's now in critical condition and fighting for his life. His aides are desperate to get him out of Russia after they claim he was poisoned. Ian Pannell has more.
Tonight, Russia's best-known opposition leader and outspoken critic to Vladimir Putin in intensive care in a coma amid allegations he's been poisoned. Alexei Navalny suddenly fell ill on a flight to Moscow. You can hear a painful moan. Other passengers filming just after the plane makes an emergency landing in Siberia. Navalny then rushed to the hospital where he was put on a ventilator. His spokeswoman saying Navalny was poisoned, perhaps in a cup of tea he drank this morning, although the hospital isn't confirming this. Navalny's a major thorn in the side of the Kremlin and Vladimir Putin, often leading anti-Kremlin demonstrations. He's been beaten up, arrested and attacked multiple times and even hospitalized before, again with suspected poisoning. A number of Putin opponents have been poisoned in the past, famously the Skripals in England 2 years ago and Alexander Litvinenko in 2006, who died after being poisoned. The Kremlin's always denied involvement.
Ian Pannell joins us now, and as you reported, Ian, this is the second time he may have been poisoned, but explain to our viewers just how big of a figure Navalny is.
Oh, I mean, he's huge. He is, in some senses, the public figurehead of the opposition. He's often seen at protest marches, not just an opposition figure, but also one of Russia's leading investigative journalists. He is a thorn in the side of the Kremlin, and in particular of President Vladimir Putin. The man has been arrested multiple times. He's been beaten up. He's been hassled, harassed out there on opposition protests. So he is an important figure. And for this to happen in such a public way will send shockwaves across Russia.
And you mentioned also that his aides want him out of Russia. What's the latest on that?
Yeah, that's right. So they're desperate to try and get him to Europe for medical treatment. Chancellor Merkel of Germany and President Macron of France have both offered that facility. They say that they will provide medical care for Navalny. They will even offer him some form of asylum, although I think it's very unlikely that he would want that. So they're desperate to get him out. Also, a German non-profit that has done this before with people who are suspected of being victims of potentially poisoning by the Kremlin, certainly poisoning, have got them out of the country for medical treatment, say that they're going to fly a plane overnight to try and get him out. But so far, Russian hospital authorities are refusing to let him leave.
And Ian, while we have you, you're also in Lithuania right now, where the opposition leader in Belarus is hiding out as the man known as Europe's last dictator struggles to hold on. Is the EU pressure campaign having any effect?
I mean, so far not. I think there's a sense of disappointment in the opposition camp that the EU didn't go further. It didn't reject the results of the election. It didn't reject the continued presidency in the sixth term, I might add, of President Lukashenko. Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, we went to see her people today. They were insistent that what they want is support from Washington. They want President Trump to speak out much more strongly. They also want Congress to act. They're desperate for some kind of pressure that either they recognize this transition council that they've set up and enter into negotiations, or there will be more meaningful consequences than the kind that we've seen issued by the European Union and threatened by the United States. At the moment, they're talking about more opposition rallies, a big one this weekend, continued pressure. But I think at the moment, Lukashenko, he may well be feeling the pressure, but it's certainly not enough to make him go.
Certainly that pressure, though, not letting up. Ian Pannell, thanks so much for your reporting. Still ahead here on Prime. Earlier, we reported on the fires ravaging Northern California. Later in the show, we'll take you inside the fight. Veteran firefighters say they never faced such extreme conditions. And on top of all that, COVID. The plan to release hundreds of millions of genetically modified mosquitoes in the Florida Keys and the major concerns. Plus, Joe Biden in a few hours will make the biggest speech of his life, but he's no stranger to conventions. How many he's attended, though, that might actually surprise you. But first, our tweet of the day. It's National Radio Day, and the U.S. Holocaust Memorial reminds us of how one program influenced Anne Frank to chronicle her story so that we would never forget. everybody. We are, of course, just moments away from former Vice President Joe Biden's big night when he'll finally accept his party's nomination for president. Tonight, we're going to take a look back by the numbers at how for Biden this unique convention has been decades in the making. Biden has attended 12 Democratic national conventions over 48 years. This is the only one that's been primarily virtual. Biden's first convention was back in 1972 in Miami, which he attended in an unofficial capacity during his first Senate run. That year, at age 29, Biden became the 6th youngest person ever elected to the U.S. Senate, where he served for 36 years. 1988 was the only convention that Biden has missed because he was recovering from surgery. As vice president, Biden spoke at the 2012 and also 2016 conventions. Biden has made 3 presidential runs, but only one time tonight does he accept the Democratic Party's nomination for president. At age 77, if he wins in November, Biden will become the oldest person ever elected president of the United States, and it would culminate nearly half a century in public life. Still lots to get to here on Prime. The major multi-hundred-million-dollar settlement announced because of the Flint water crisis, and our conversation with the black millennial mayor who put his career on the line in the former capital of the Confederacy to buck tradition and remove statues in his city. But first, here are some of the trending stories on abcnews.com.
A not guilty plea from Steve Bannon. President Trump's former chief strategist is charged with ripping off donors of an online fundraising scheme to build a southern border wall. Bannon was released on $5 million bail, secured by more than $1 million in assets.
Prosecutors say Bannon, the former Trump campaign CEO and White House chief strategist, Air Force vet Brian Kolfage, and 2 others, siphoning over $1 million from the account, using some of it for personal expenses and to give hundreds of thousands to Kolfage to fund a lavish lifestyle.
I know nothing about the project other than I didn't like, when I read about it, I didn't like it. I feel very badly. I haven't been dealing with him for a long period of time.
This is the 12th Democratic convention Joe Biden will attend, but the first where he'll be center stage, receiving the party's nomination to be the next president of the United States.
We're going to win this battle for the soul of America and to build our nation back better than it was even before this happened.
Tonight's theme will be America's Promise, and Biden is expected to lay out his vision to unite the country, something voters have frequently heard from him during the campaign.
The Democratic Party is coming together.
Dr. Anthony Fauci back in the news, but not about the coronavirus. The nation's top infectious disease specialist is recovering from outpatient surgery to remove a polyp from his vocal cord. The condition can cause hoarseness and can be caused from overusing one's voice.
Because we have a way of doing things in this country that we care about safety and we care about efficacy.
Fauci's signature rasp could be attributed to his nonstop media appearances. In an interview, Fauci said he believed the problem began while recovering from the flu in December, saying the only way to make it better was to avoid talking, but, quote, that's not in the cards right now. Fauci is said to be resting at home.
The Cincinnati Reds suspended an announcer for using an anti-gay slur on air.
Capitals of the world.
Tom Brenneman suspended indefinitely after making a homophobic slur on a hot mic. Brenneman later making an on-air apology.
I made a comment earlier tonight that I guess went out over the air that I am deeply ashamed of. From the bottom of my heart, I'm so very, very sorry. As there's a drive in a deep left field by Castellanos, it will be a home run.
Interrupting that apology to call a home run on the field.
I don't know if I'm going to be putting on this headset again.
Brenneman leaving the booth after the apology, replaced mid-game by another announcer. The Reds suspending Brenneman shortly thereafter.
The state of Michigan has reached a $600 million settlement of lawsuits with residents of Flint, Michigan over lead-tainted water.
Specifics about how much money impacted residents will receive has not been announced. The agreement still needs to be formalized.
At first glance, it sounds like a nightmare, a plan to release 750 million mosquitoes into the Florida Keys. But these have been genetically modified, intended to stop the spread of several deadly diseases like Zika. Named OX5034, the mosquito has been engineered to produce female offspring that die before growing large enough to spread disease. The pilot program is controversial among residents and environmental advocacy groups. The EPA and local authorities gave final approval, with the insect set for release over the next 2 years.
While hundreds of fires burn across the West tonight, there is great concern that between the extreme heat and the pandemic, firefighters are overwhelmed. Their hands are full at this time. However, the threat of climate change seems to be posing the biggest long-term danger in the fight against the flames. And our Will Carr jumped into action with firefighters on the front lines and has this closer look.
As fires are scorching California, veteran firefighters say they've never seen such extreme conditions. In recent years, the winds...
This fire is made to run. You can see those flames behind me. The embers are burning.
The humidity levels and the bone-dry brush have led to both California's largest fire and the state's deadliest, the 2018 Camp Fire.
Check out this tree right here. You have flames shooting hundreds of feet up into the air. This entire community is burned to the ground. Everything here is gone.
With crews battling this year's fires in both northern and southern California, we teamed up with the Orange County Fire Authority to look at the conditions from the air.
It seems that every year many of us have been doing this a long time have talked about seeing fire spread like we've never seen before.
Chief Brian Finnessy points out the dead vegetation that's dangerously dry after years of drought. This type of brush acts like jet fuel for flames, helping an initial spark explode into an out-of-control fire in a matter of minutes.
Those rates of spread are beyond anything that we were used to back in the 70s, the 80s, and certainly the 90s.
With this year's low rainfall rates here in Northern California, anywhere from 25 to 70% below normal rainfall, under drought conditions in all of Northern California, that does play a factor in the fact that we've been going to additional fires.
To help, CAL FIRE's putting a new fleet of Black Hawk helicopters called Firehawks into the air.
These new Firehawks carry up to 1,000 gallons of water. They have twin engines. They are bigger, faster, and safer than their predecessors.
These helicopters are helping crews save homes right now, but they can only do so much. Firefighters across the state are battling both an intense heat wave mixed with lightning strikes and a pandemic.
Some of the fires we've been bringing in a new piece of equipment. It's a mobile thermal imager, and as firefighters come into base camp, they walk through this trailer that scans their body for body temperature, and if they find an increased body temperature, they're then brought out for further evaluation.
CAL FIRE's in the middle of hiring more than 800 new firefighters due to shortages in crews. California normally gets help from inmates on the front lines, but because prison populations are vulnerable to the virus, many inmates aren't available this year.
What are the biggest changes that are having to be made because of COVID-19? Well, the PPE, you look at our fire engines, all our firefighters are carrying 3 days worth of PPE when they leave the station for these wildland fires now. When they get to a camp, they're being handed food. There's no more chow line. We don't sleep in sleeping trailers. It's a whole list of behaviors that have to change if we're going to keep our firefighters healthy. My biggest concern is having the number of firefighters healthy and available to respond to these wildland fires. Not just my firefighters, but my pilots, my bulldozer operators, my hand crew. If they're not healthy and they're not at work, you're not going to have the type of response that the community would expect.
It's a dangerous new reality that comes just as California's wildfire season is getting warmed up. In California, Will Carr, ABC News.
Our thanks to Will for that report. This week's Democratic convention has trained a bright spotlight on the so-called racial reckoning that's happening around the country, even the world in some places. An epicenter of the unrest has been Richmond, Virginia, the former capital of the Confederacy and the site of some of the most prominent Confederate statues in the country. Tonight, we're joined by Richmond's Mayor, LeVar Marcus Stoney, the youngest mayor in that city's history. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, Mayor.
Thank you, Lindsay.
So in a bold and rather controversial move this summer, you used emergency powers to order the removal of Confederate statues on city land, specifically those that line the historic Monument Avenue. You're now facing legal challenges as a result of that. Why did you feel so strongly this needed to be done?
Well, I felt so strongly because I believe earlier in June, there was a young man who was trying to bring down a monument in the city of Portsmouth, Virginia. And while trying to bring down that monument, the monument fell on him. And the guy, I hear, flatlined at least 3 times at the hospital. And so I did not want that to happen in my own city, where our monuments are huge. They're the biggest, I think, in the country. And this area on Monument Avenue was the center of a lot of the unrest. There was a number of calls, over 100+ calls for service in that one area. And so I thought it needed to be removed right away. And so on July 1, I removed those monuments, evoking my emergency powers as the emergency management director of my city during a state of emergency.
And let's go back to June, when protesters in your city tied ropes around an 8-foot Jefferson Davis statue to pull it down. You were concerned again about everybody's safety, but do you consider these people to be criminals?
We obviously do not support unlawful behavior in the city of Richmond. We're against that. And at the time, removing a monument before July 1 was considered a felonious offense. And although I agree that those symbols are racist, they symbolize hate, they symbolize, division. I believe the right way to do that is for the government to take a stand and remove them ourselves, and that's exactly what we did.
You're, of course, facing a tough re-election battle at this time. Do you think that your move to remove Confederate monuments will help or hurt your chances? And do you feel supported by today's Democratic Party?
Oh, yes, I do feel supported by our Democratic Party. And I will say, when I removed those monuments, the thought of politics never crossed my mind. The thought that I had was the thought about my grandmother, who was a domestic laborer herself, who worked in people's homes, and hearing stories from people who lived in the city for a very long time. They said that, when they were little kids, their grandmothers would work on Monument Avenue as the part of the help. And what would they think? What would my grandmother think? My grandmother would think that the right thing to do was remove those symbols of hate, and that's exactly what we did. And I'm thankful now for the city council who agreed with it, and now they are permanently removed.
Now, you've been through 3 different police chiefs so far, and your city has certainly seen its share of unrest these past few months. Is defunding the police an answer, and how do you maintain public order while making seismic changes like removing century-old monuments? I think reimagining and reforming the police department is the direction that we should move into. I just believe that we should fund the change we want to see in our police department. We should fund the reforms. I don't believe that we need someone who's armed to show up at every nonviolent call that goes into our 911 center. And so we're working to create a Marcus alert, which we call a Marcus alert, which is a crisis alert for those who might be experiencing a mental or behavioral health issue. And our officers need more training. They need more training. You have to fund that. So I'm committed to funding the change, funding the reforms we want to see in our police department. Tonight is, of course, the last night of the Democratic National Convention. You've been a party insider now for quite some time. Is there anything that you'd like to hear tonight that hasn't been said or hasn't been given enough attention? I've heard a lot over the last couple of days, and it has been an amazing convention. We have truly adapted to this new normal because of the pandemic. I think President Obama made the case on why everyone should go out to vote and why Donald Trump is an existential threat to this country. Moving forward, though, I think that tonight, Vice President Biden can make the case on why he's the individual who can bring this country together. We are at our most vulnerable stage in our country's history, I believe, at least in my lifetime. And we need someone who's actually going to be a uniter, not a divider, not someone who's going to depend on the playbook that President Trump has been depending on for the last 3 3/4 years, and that's a playbook of division. Mayor Stoney, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate having you on.
Thank you, Lindsay.
And when we come back, what to look out for the final night of the DNC, which is set to get underway in about an hour. Welcome back, everybody. You have a dime and a nickel. Well, for just 15 cents, you can watch a movie at one of the AMC movie theaters reopening today. But the deal is just for today alone. The company is the largest movie theater chain in the world and has had its locations closed for nearly 5 months now. 100 locations are now opening back up, but you must wear a mask if you watch a film. And if you're wondering why just 15 cents, that's the price of admission from 100 years ago. We are, of course, coming up on the final night of the Democratic National Convention, and we'll continue our complete coverage with our powerhouse political team right here on ABC News Live. For a preview of what you can expect for tonight, let's bring in ABC News political director Rick Klein. Rick, so of course the big speech tonight coming from Joe Biden officially accepting the nomination. There's been a focus on his character and his experience in the previous days, but what are you looking for tonight as far as his agenda?
Yeah, it's interesting. If you're watching the first couple of days of the convention, you'd think the most urgent issue for Democrats is defeating Donald Trump. And it actually might be. We're going to see a bit of a turn, though, toward people's lives. That's what the Biden campaign has been signaling about this final night of the convention, that it's important to show exactly why Biden-Harris policies would improve people's lives and livelihoods, and a specific effort to showcase the economy. We're going to have Vice President Biden engage in a conversation with kind of lunch bucket Democrats, union workers and the like, about what they can do to make their lives better. That may be a key to his appeal in some of the Rust Belt states, and it may be something that differentiates him from most of the other national Democrats these days, something they want to showcase on this last night.
And after the night of women that we had last night, it looks like it's guys' night tonight, including several 2020 candidates.
Yeah, a lot of his former rivals night. We're going to hear from Andrew Yang and Cory Booker, Pete Buttigieg with a brief speech. And interestingly, Michael Bloomberg, who, of course, spent about $1 billion trying to seek the Democratic nomination back when it looked like Joe Biden wasn't going to be the nominee, is going to take a prime spot, taking up a few minutes right before Biden's family, talking about the economy. And it's notable, Lindsay, because it is a snapshot of where the party was at the time, that it seemed like Michael Bloomberg was the savior from the progressive wing, the Sanders and Warren wing of the party. Of course, Biden started to consolidate support. There went Bloomberg's support, but it's a controversial decision to turn to him. He is still a polarizing figure. Any billionaire is in circles like these.
And Rick, what have we learned about how Joe Biden is going to be introduced tonight?
We all should be introduced like this at some point in our lives, Lindsay. Davis Guggenheim, the Oscar-winning director, has put together what the campaign is saying is just a breathtaking video that showcases a couple of friendships, some unlikely ones. One with Senator John McCain, who's been talked about earlier this week, a Republican senator from Arizona, and of course the Republican nominee for president in 2008, who had a long-standing, strong working relationship and friendship with Vice President Biden, and an Amtrak conductor. Vice President Biden is, of course, Amtrak's most famous regular rider. He has a whole train station in Delaware named after him, and he struck up a friendship with many conductors and regulars on those trains by going back and forth from Washington, D.C. to Wilmington every night to be with his kids. It's about a 2-hour trip each time, so 4 hours just about every workday for decades spent on those trains. He earned the right to that station, and he earned a pretty powerful friendship that we're going to hear about tonight.
And lastly, this convention has been so different from years past. How do you think it's gone from a viewer perspective? And any idea if there's going to get we're going to get a balloon drop at the end?
I don't know how you do a convention without balloons. And we saw last night a glimpse of how the Democrats have put together a virtual stage for Kamala Harris that this kind of looks like, if you squint a little bit and ignore the fact that there's no people around, it looks like a regular stage. And I would expect some kind of a celebration there, maybe a celebration outside the arena where people are starting to show up kind of drive-in movie style as well. I think there's been hit or miss moments. The intimacy of some of the speeches, particularly thinking about Michelle Obama and Jill Biden, President Obama last night, I think actually was helped by the fact that there was no cheering, no interruptions. But Kamala Harris, on the other hand, I think she had a little difficulty in giving a traditional political speech when you don't have any of that audience feedback. I'd like to also make sure that we always see that roll call of the states. I've been craving Rhode Island calamari for the last 3 days now. I still haven't managed to procure any, but I found it to just be a beautiful and frankly fun tour of 57 states and territories at a time where all of us have spent way too much time inside. We need to be outside more, and we need to see those the beautiful sights and sounds of America more.
Right. People are saying that they'd like to see that every 4 years, even once we're back in person. Rick Klein, thanks so much.
Thanks, Lindsay.
And before we go tonight, our image of the day. On the heels of the final night of the Democratic convention, the Republicans are now setting up their own stage in Washington, D.C., right near the White House. In just a few days, they'll begin making their own pitch to America. And that is our show for tonight. I'm about to switch sets and be joined by Tom Yamas and, of course, our Powerhouse Political Roundtable. Stay tuned to ABC News Live for the final night of the Democratic National Convention. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Good night.